So welcome back, everybody. And I know that we're at the third and final part of our journey today. Very excited. We are now moving into our third panel. Now, this morning we had a bit of a reflection in our first session about the DT4E program, where we'd come from, what lessons we'd learnt, what kind of challenges and issues we need to think of. In this afternoon session, we've had a very dynamic panel looking at private sector, the different issues to consider, how we get private sector more engaged, what the employer perspective and the recruiter's perspective looks like. And now we're going to triangulate in this third panel, looking at the experience of the talents themselves. And as per my script, the source of the magic, which I think is a lovely way of describing it. Without these incredibly dedicated, very inspirational people, none of us would be here. So I think it's really testimony to these great and diverse talents that we'll have the stories in this last panel. Now, we will put forward in this last session a view from the source and highlight specifically some of the challenges faced by displaced candidates before departure, and also the importance of understanding these challenges to better support them in their success and their broader integration. We're very lucky to have with us today two DT4E alumni, two displaced candidates who've been hired through the program and have been able to leverage their skills to change their lives and relocate for better futures. And I really encourage you at the end of this session to speak with them during the breaks and to ask questions in this session about their experience.
So please let's welcome Lara White, Senior Labour Migration Specialist at IOM Lebanon, Melissa Martino, Complementary Pathways Expert at UNHCR Brussels, Daniele Albanese, Head of EU Programs at TBB. Welcome back, Khaled Akar, Network Field Technician and TBB Alumnus. And finally, Sara Chabayta, Senior Nurse and also TBB Alumna. Our final panel of the day will be moderated by Holly Asquith, the Head of UK Programs at TBB. Holly has worked in the humanitarian sector for a decade across both Australia and the UK. We really are overrepresented Aussies today. That's not intentional. She's worked in startups, large charities and NGOs, building and contributing to initiatives that integrate refugees through meaningful employment opportunities. Holly is currently leading on the Displaced Talent Mobility Program in the UK. Welcome, everybody.
Microphone would be a good start, wouldn't it? So thank you everyone for joining us for this last panel of the day, and thank you to our wonderful colleagues here. Let everybody introduce themselves again with one additional question, bit of an icebreaker. But could you share, maybe Melissa, one moment or experience that you've had in your career to date on refugee labour mobility that has had a lasting impact on you?
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. So my name is Melissa Martino. I'm the focal point for education and labour mobility pathways for refugees here in Brussels, and I also work in Belgium and Luxembourg. And so I will say, but my background is in refugee protection and in resettlement. So over 10 years, I've worked in refugee resettlement in a diversity of countries across the world. And as you know, the needs for solution among refugees greatly outweighs the opportunities available to them. So for decades, part of my job was to weigh through the different stories of refugees and to identify who was most in need of resettlement. And often I would meet talented refugees who did not meet the requirements for resettlement, but who could offer so much if they were given the opportunity to go to a third country. And it was always so discouraging for me when I had to tell them, sorry, maybe you won't qualify for resettlement, and I'm not really sure what else exists for you. And really, I remember that each time a refugee came to me and say, don't worry, I have found my own solution. I've applied to jobs abroad. Now I just need you to help me get there. And I think there is something really special about refugee labour mobility, which is that instead of asking for refugees to wait for opportunities to be handed out to them, we are giving them the opportunity to make to make opportunities for themselves. And I think that's really important.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, first of all. And I see good vibes around, so I'm very excited, and after coffee, even more. So how I came to labor mobility, it is thanks to an experience that I have in my previous work, working in the humanitarian space. I used to work in Africa, Middle East, and Asia, and interviewing refugees for humanitarian mission programs. So meeting a lot of people, vulnerable refugees all over, I mean, those countries. And I was in Islamabad interviewing refugees, and a group of girls came to us, and I had the opportunity to interview them, women, Afghan women, and they made like an interview, like a job interview with me. I wasn't there to offer them a job, but I remember that I thought we should do something different. It's not only the humanitarian space that can solve everything. They were people with skills, with their CVs, with a lot of experiences, with a degree, with a master degree in China, another one in Scotland, and they appeared to be refugees after the Taliban took over in Iraq. They were hiding in Islamabad because they were not safe, and they were looking for a job opportunity. They spoke 5 languages. There was an engineer there, and we said, okay, we need to build something different, and that's why I came across TBB, and I'm here as a head of Europe program, trying to put some energy into the system and to make it work at scale in the next future.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I would say it's my pleasure to be here and presented Palestinian nurses in the UK. My name is Sara Chabayta. I'm a 3rd-generation Palestinian refugee who was born and raised in Lebanon. I have a bachelor degree in nursing studies from Lebanese University, Faculty of Public Health, with nearly 9 years of experience in oncology and hematology settings. I moved to UK through a TBB program, Talent Displaced program, TBB Talent Displaced program with collaboration of the IOM in April 2022, where they actually helped me and support me to find better job opportunity, especially in one of the best oncology hospitals in UK, which is the Royal Marsden Hospital. First of all, I started my career here in UK as a healthcare assistant with Band 3. And then I became a registered nurse after passing all my exams within the first year. And then hopefully by a lot of support that were the employer give me, and even the team and the patients, I got promoted to a senior staff nurse, and now I'm preparing for master degree as well. So basically, there's a lot of really good moments, I would say, in my experience here in UK, but I would say also as a refugees, I never felt that welcoming or like valued comparing to Lebanon. Because like, you know, when I chose to be a nurse, I was like, oh, okay, I have really like degrading in the schools. I got a scholarship of physiotherapist. And I was like, okay, but I can't practicing it because there's a lot of like more than 39 liberal professionals that's spent for Palestinian to practicing it in Lebanon. And I was like, okay, let's do nursing so I can just find easily a job and I can get a work permit as well. So I studied nursing and I was like, okay, it's just like there's no progressing. You just will be just a registered nurse, even if you have all the skills, even if you work for 7 years, even if you become, you know, having all the clinical, having all the leadership development skills, but you will be the same. So I moved to UK and I felt really valued, respectful. I got a lot of support even from the patients who were like really like happy to listen to my story, to encourage me. Even like some of the patients were just coming and
tried to talk to me about my story and even like teach me like how to practice English and how to be more confident. And yeah, thank you.
First of all, very happy to be here and sitting on this panel. I've been working on labor market policy for probably about 25 years. Started off working in employment insurance, moved to the temporary foreign worker program in Canada, and then joined IOM 13 years ago. So most of my experience has really been, again, probably 16 years worth of experience working on labor migration. So that's the cohort that I have been working most closely with, trying to promote decent work and ethical recruitment for labor migrants in supply chains and in countries of destination. I don't actually have a lot of experience working with the refugee population. I have some personal stories, though. My grandfather and his family came over as refugees, like many people in Canada, which is my home country. Additionally, in the late 70s, early 80s, my mother was very committed to the issue of community integration, and we spent a lot of time driving Vietnamese new settlers around rural Nova Scotia, getting them to appointments and bringing them to English as a second language trainings, and so now I find myself in a situation where really focusing on complementary pathways is a nice marriage between these two areas of interest and commitment. So that's a bit of my story, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more from the panelists. Thank you.
So my name is Khaled. I'm happy to be in this panel, panel 3, second panel for today. I want to get another chocolate bar for my wife. Happy wife, happy life. So I'll talk about like other part of the experience and how do I heard about TPP, because I mentioned I heard about TPP, but like over the years, I think communication is a key, because communication and searching, because I've been like looking for a better opportunity for all of my life, and I reach a point like to read reports and use about the local NGOs and how could they help the refugees. And I read once I read the report, it was shocking, because I found out like in Lebanon there are for each 400 individual refugee there is one NGO. But what are they doing? They are not giving us opportunities. Talking about local NGOs. So I met a friend in 2022. He's now working with IOM. He's a data analyst. He's my best friend now. And he was the reason to tell me about TPP. So when you work on yourself hard and look forward for a better opportunity, good to know like the good people and the people, the refugees, that they have potential, you will succeed in your life. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That was, I think, really, really useful context. And again, just a reminder of the immense experience and backgrounds that we have to go through this conversation. So I think, to start with, this panel is obviously focused on the source and what we're aiming to do through Displaced Talent for Europe and all of our country programs is generate equitable access to skilled migration programs. So what I wanted to understand from your perspectives was, we know that there are systemic barriers that exist. Gemma actually mentioned in one of her panels before that the nexus of these programs is thinking about the Venn diagram of humanitarian, of skilled migration, and where does this fit in the middle? So maybe starting with Melissa again, from your perspective, what are some of the barriers that exist for candidates in accessing work opportunities abroad?
Thank you. So we've talked a lot today, and it makes sense about everything that refugees can bring. So they have talents, they have ambition, they have aspiration, they have a wealth of resilience they've built throughout the years. But it's also important to be reminded of some of the things they often don't have. And one of them is identity and travel documents, also copies of their transcript or their diplomas, and the financial means to access visas, and also all of the costs. We talked a lot in the previous panel about the cost for employers, but also if you want to apply to an opportunity abroad, there is a wealth of costs. And I think it's really important that we keep these aspects in mind as we are trying to remove this barrier to access to these migration flows. And I want to just deep dive a little bit into the first topic, which is identity and travel documents. So most people who apply for work opportunity abroad, they do it with a passport. And that passport provides them with some protection, right? It provides them with the right to return to their country of origin should something happen. It provides them with some protection through consular services. But that's not the case for refugees, right? For refugees, traveling on a national passport can, on the contrary, lead to risk. Because what refugees needs most through these migration flows is protection from refoulement, that is to say, protection from being sent back to their country of origin where they are not safe. So it's really important that we think about, okay, so what other kind of travel document can refugees have access to that will provide this level of protection? And there are some tools around, and one of them is refugee travel documents. So refugee travel documents are not issued by your country of nationality. They are generally issued by your country of asylum. And they provide you with some very specific protections that are very important to keep in mind. One of them, as I mentioned, is protection from refoulement. But another one that's also quite important is the ability to return to your country of first asylum. And why this is important is also that because for refugees to decide to make this great leap to take a labor opportunity abroad can often lead to, for example, permanent separation from family members, which you cannot bring with you. So ensuring that you have travel document that allows you to return can be very important. It's important, and so UNHCR has been advocating with a lot of the partners who are here in the room to ensure that refugees have access to the travel document. And for that, it's really important that we bring sourcing countries into the conversation. So countries of first asylum, because they will be the one providing this document. It's very important that this document be machine readable, that it can be used like any other passports. It's important that it can be renewed in an embassy abroad, so you don't have to be in fear of when they expire. And for that, it's really important that, as I said, we engage sourcing country, we support them in issuing these documents, and that's also where European countries can play a role in engaging with these countries of first asylum and asking, how can I help? So that you can issue these documents. But it's also important that we think, even if a refugee has access to these travel documents, our migration system prepared to use them. And we're just discussing this with Sara right now, that often our migration system are not meant for, you know, I just had this case yesterday. So when you apply for a visa, you will state your nationality. And then you state what document you enter and which country has issued this document. And often, if your country of nationality and the country that issued your document are different, the whole system freezes up and it creates an error, and suddenly you are stuck. And this is all the more important because nowadays most visas are handled by intermediaries, right? They're not handled by embassy primarily. So then you are just stuck in a kind of limbo. So it's really important that when we do advocacy to facilitate this movement, we really think about, okay, are we ensuring that they have access to the document, but also have we prepared our embassies? Have we prepared our consular services? Are we raising this awareness that it is in fact very normal nowadays for a refugee to also apply for a labor mobility, a visa based on skill? So I think that's one element that is a barrier that's really interesting to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. That's really, really fantastic. And I think highlights again what we discussed earlier today, that we did have candidates due to come here that were, had their visas denied and weren't able to get those sort of travel documents in time. Daniele, do you want to share any additional sort of barriers from your perspective?
Yeah, it's not only my perspective, it's the perspective of the source team that is working every day supporting candidates moving through labor mobility pathways. And I think that one of the main barriers is the same barriers that we all kind of had the experience with when we were looking for a job when we were younger, seeing some job vacancies and say, maybe it's a dream, but I cannot apply, and it's not for me. I cannot do it. And it is the same thing that this kind of distrust, discourage that we see in refugees. That they can see, because as we all see LinkedIn or job opportunities all over the world, they don't even apply. They don't think that is for them. International job opportunities are not for refugees. That is the mindset that probably we see in a lot of refugee camps or refugee-like situations. So this kind of distrust, the sense of belonging that is not with them, because years of protracting crisis or ages of protracting crisis is excluding them from the workforce globally. So it is one of the main point that meeting a lot of refugees I see. Of course, there are also systematic barriers. I just endorse about the travel document issue. There is an information gap. As Khaled was mentioning, it's not only that I'm not, as a refugee, I will not apply to the job, but I don't even know where to look for it, that NHS is looking for someone internationally. How, if there is not someone that can facilitate this procedure? If I'm in a refugee camp in Ethiopia, why should I have a look to a job in Germany or wherever? So the information gap is huge. Over 90% of refugees express their strong interest in labor mobility just if they knew it. And they can keep wait also for job opportunities and not to take irregular movement just if it is credible, if it is an opportunity really for them. And then there is the international recruitment gaps that are the same gaps that were highlighted before for all of the people, but even more for refugees, like lack of career guidance in refugee-like situation, needs for vocational training, lack of electricity and technology. In a lot of situations, we are trying to facilitate international recruitment and job interviews with an engineer in Islamabad, as I said, and then electricity just go down, and the employer say, why should I hire those candidates if I have someone else to hire? Of course, there is the labor visa processing, and I fully agree about the investment on consulates, on the international processing of visas, language skills that it will be one of the main barriers in Europe, as we already mentioned, long and complicated and unpredictable procedures. That's one of the key takeover that we should take to European governments. It's not only the length of the procedure, it is the predictability of the procedure that we should address. And then all the exit and departure, exit permit, exit fines. We know that it's a matter of negotiation with hosting governments, but sometimes refugees need to pay to go out from a country. So this is, of course, barriers that we need to face.
Thank you. And Lara, I wonder if you could comment there on your work in Lebanon, and in particular about the systemic barriers that you've come across.
So in Lebanon, first of all, just to understand a little bit of the context, there are an estimated 1.5 million Syrians who remain in Lebanon. And that's a huge number in comparison with the population. Lebanon has been hosting this population since the beginning of the conflict. And as I think colleagues at UNHCR would agree, there just simply aren't enough opportunities to resettle through other protection-related pathways for resettlement. At the same time, there are some systemic barriers to accessing complementary pathways. Also, just to note that out of the 1.5 million Syrians, approximately 20% in a recent survey indicated that they would be open to third-party resettlement in third-party countries, or third countries. So the question then becomes, how do we get people there, and how can they access these programs? Understanding that when there are these systemic barriers, such as identity documentation, lack of access of knowing of opportunities, people often then invest in irregular migration, and that investment can lead to deadly consequences. So a lot of our programming in Lebanon is really targeting how to try to eliminate irregular migration through smuggling networks and rather provide safe legal options for people to migrate, including Syrians, but also other displaced populations. I just wanted to note, because Daniele, your list was extensive, so thank you for doing part of my work for me. But I think that issue of lack of recognition of prior learning is a real obstacle. Often, Syrians may not have, if they're in Lebanon irregularly, they may not have access to the documentation. Well, first of all, they may not have access to entry into vocational training. Additionally, they may not have access to certification of that training. And so when put forward compared to another applicant who may be Palestinian or another person in protection status, they're not, there's not a level playing field. And so that's one of the reasons why we found in Lebanon that while DT4E is an incredible program and it's been an overwhelming success, we're not reaching the very vulnerable Syrian population. And so our programming in phase 2 of DT4E, but also some additional program is really going to focus on the systemic barriers explicitly for Syrians, looking, for example, at access to language training, access to credential recognition, and trying to bridge those gaps.
Brilliant, thank you. And I just wanted to pick up on an example there as well of the comments around exit permits and travel documents, and in practice why DT4E and this, partnerships are so important. And I was reflecting actually on a case we had a few months ago. It was candidates on their way to Belfast actually for an employment opportunity, and the airline redirected their flight, and it meant that they had to stop somewhere in Europe on the way. They didn't have Schengen visas. They were issued a single entry travel document, and we were faced with this sort of urgent situation of, okay, we've supported this person through this program, but how do you then embed all of the actors in this, and also support the employer, who at that time was sort of coming to us saying, what are exit permits? They have to do what? So also these sort of linking to the employment panel that we had earlier, how we address these systemic barriers and then support employers through going through those processes as well. And I just wanted to turn to our lovely alumni here. Were there anything that was missed from your perspective on barriers that you faced in accessing these opportunities? Sara.
Okay, so I would say just thank you for highlighting about the travel documents barrier, because it's unfair for just a document to control a lot of talent people. So in addition to that, I would say because of the migration process was new to us, and there's a lot of lack of information at the beginning. So we're unsure what exactly document we need to start, like for applying for the visa, for as a nurse, we need to register for the NMC. So there's a lot of recommended documents. And because of Lebanon instability at that time, and there's like a lot of economics problem, we faced a lot of delays. Like, for example, I asked my university to get just an English letter that I studied in English. And I went like for many times, and there's like, the printer is not working, there is no electricity. And at that time I was still working as a full-time job. And because I don't know when I'm traveling, I was unable to resign because I need money, to keep to cover all the expenses as well. So this is one of the problem. Even with the translation, we had a lot of problems. Even if I want to modify my transcripts, also it was takes ages like 3 or 2 months. I asked for a good standing letter from Ministry of Health, and I went there. And when the employee there, when he knows that I am Palestinian, he said, okay, come back on Tuesday. I said, okay. And then it will be ready. It's just a letter, standard letter, and then he just need to sign it. And then when I went back on Tuesday and he said, oh, you're Palestinian, so you're traveling and we need nurses. So it's not signed yet. Go and come back again. So this is a lot of like barriers, not only, I would say, logistics like travel document, but also we don't really have that much support from Lebanese government, I would say, and even from employers in Lebanon. Even with my experience letter, I asked it like 3 months before traveling, and I got it just only 2 days before before my flight. So all of these is really frustrated and really, you know, make you just, you know, stressful. And yeah.
Thank you. And I think that you maintain sort of hope and positivity and assurance through that process to end up in the UK is, again, really sort of inspiring. And Khaled, we were actually just chatting today about this and about the, you know, Daniele has alluded to the mistrust and misconceptions, and how did you come to trust TBB in this program and DT4E more broadly, and knowing that you know, you've got friends and people in your network who've taken different routes.
Yeah, so basically, whenever you look for a better future or a better opportunity, you, as I said, like you have to search and look for like NGOs that needs to help you. So I built trust with TBB and IOM because they used the proper communication channels. Like they reached to me like on for the meeting, and then on WhatsApp, Slack. So you could, it's very good. Like it feels like it's a physical communication. So here I had like this uncertainty that I can make it or they can secure the job for me. But once we started with the process and they helped me with all the information that I will never overcome by myself. So I built trust, and they went through all the details of my relocation and securing the job in Ireland. It was very helpful from TBB and IOM.
Great, thank you. Let's move to think a little bit about Europe as a destination. I think as a panel, we had a conversation last week about the assumption that we sometimes make about when a candidate receives a job opportunity, wherever that might be, if they're on the talent catalogue, if they're looking for labour mobility, that they would say, yes, of course, I'll take it. Whereas in practice, we know that we also have to be selling opportunities to candidates. We've had that in the UK where candidates have said, oh, but it's a permanent program in Australia or it's a permanent program in Canada. I'd rather wait for an opportunity there. And again, that's a part of the informed decision making and providing agency for individuals to make those choices. So Daniele, let's think about how well you think that Europe is currently positioned to attract displaced talent.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I think that even listening the words of the Commission this morning and the new Commission that is coming to be in place in very soon, the new Commission will have an historical opportunity in the next 5 years to make irregular movements towards Europe history by addressing labor gaps. So this is the main challenges that we have with different governments. We are seeing a lot of right-wing parties going to increase, and talking about safe and legal pathways, it is a key to address also regular movement. So it is a matter of really to tap into labor gaps to address those gaps and increase and scale up in the future. I just want to quote the future of European competitiveness, the report from Draghi that was released a couple of days ago, that has a chapter on addressing skills gaps and how to make Europe attractive, saying that EU is entering the first period of its recent history where growth will not be supported by population growth. By 2040, the workforce is expected to shrink by almost 2 million workers a year. So that means that we need people, we need more gaps, we will need people as it is clear. And just one more data to the ones already mentioned by Stephanie, 77% of Europe companies that hired people, hired new employees without sufficient skills. So it's not only that they are not finding people, they are finding people without sufficient skills. So we can tap into that. I would mention 5 factors of attractiveness. One is the values. Again, quoting the same report of Draghi, Europe's core values are prosperity, equity, freedom, peace, and democracy in a sustainable environment. The EU exists to ensure that Europeans can always benefit from these fundamental rights. We can increase those rights. It is a key element for our future and for our attractiveness, also for talents. So first of all, values. Cost. The cost of visas and procedures are much lower in Europe than anywhere else in the world. So it is a factor of attractiveness. Timing is not a factor of attractiveness in Europe. It takes time. It's unclear. It takes too much time. So we can work on that in different procedure and predictability, as I mentioned already. Training investment, and I see a lot of potential cooperation with development agencies that can work on the ground and tap into development world that is already training refugees. Just mentioned the example of the Duffy Scholarship. A lot of UNHCR colleagues are working on it everywhere in the world. There are scholars that went to the universities and now they end up without job. What do we do with this kind of investments that has already been done with this population? We can connect the dots with pathways, relationship. European countries, companies, multinationals, NGOs has a lot of relationships, historical relationships, cultural relationships, commercial relationship with other countries. We can tap into that. Multinationals are here and there. We can tap into that and see how this can be a factor of attractiveness. Plus one, it is credibility. We need to be credible in face of refugees. When we go there, as I mentioned before, refugees are able to wait if there is an opportunity that is credible, that is scalable, that is feasible. If not, they will come to us emailing, say, okay, I did my application and then what? So we need to be credible and scalable.
Sorry. If you don't mind, I will come in on this because this question of the attractivity of Europe, I think is very important because Europe knows that they are, we've talked about the huge labor gap and the demographic shift in Europe. And Europe is very aware that also, as they are trying to attract talent, they're also in direct competition with other very big players. So we talked about Australia, Canada, the US, China. You know, countries across the world are going to be fighting for the exact same talent. And I know we often feel like we come to this field a little bit from the place of, could you please help us? But I think we can also really think about how can we leverage the actual incredible competitiveness in this field of labor mobility to try to make sure that the opportunity we set up really serves the need of refugees. And I just want to highlight a couple of things. We've talked earlier today about how one of the big difference between refugee labor mobility to Europe and other countries is that in Europe, we offer you a 1-year visa and with a maybe renewal. If you are very lucky, you get 2 or 3 years, and you know you need at least 5 before you can request permanent residency, right? So how can we have this conversation so we can fast track labor mobility to Europe into becoming more durable solutions? Because again, for refugees, the idea that these solutions will become something durable is very important. So I think that's really something to keep in mind. We understand that the first contract may not be permanent residency. This is not Canada, but still, you know, what more can we offer? Also, the very important aspect is family unification, right? It's very important, even if I agree, maybe not every visa will allow me to bring my family with me from the get-go. But how can I ensure that they can still join me take into account the specific needs of refugees, right? Even if they are coming on migration pathways. So I think it's really important that we can really think about how we're leveraging, because we are offering something, right, to these countries, how we're leveraging this to make sure that really opportunity fit the needs of the people we serve.
Thank you. I think those are such important points. And I might turn to you, Halef, because your family is about to join you, if I am not incorrect. And I wonder if you could share anything. You talked a little bit earlier on the panel about the football club and your integration. But before you left or before you arrived, were there any misconceptions that you had about Europe or about Ireland specifically that have changed, and what might you have wanted to know before you arrived?
So I'll tell you one thing about our community. It's a little bit funny because everyone, genuinely speaking, including me, when I was a kid, and one of my relatives from Europe is coming to Lebanon. Oh, he's coming to give us money. He's coming to give us money. So we always think that Europe is guaranteed land of opportunity, and like everyone who will secure a job in Ireland will be a millionaire. So no, this misconception when we were kids or like teenagers changed my my idea. You have to work hard on yourself in Europe to adapt to the system and to prove yourself to be that on value for this country. So to solve this, to address this issue, I think TPB and IOM should share like both the opportunity and the challenges that could face everyone who's going to relocate to Ireland or UK or any country in Europe. I thought language would not be a barrier, as I discussed in the panel one. It's a barrier, okay, and you have to find a way to overcome this barrier. Maybe for me, I found like a way to watch series in English without like subtitles, to watch, to listen to podcasts, and to go and do like a hobby. If someone likes to swim, you can go to a swimming like academy or something. Football, you can go and play football, practice the language, and to overcome this barrier. One more thing of the misconception is the job that is perfectly matching our expectation, because sometimes the job is totally different from like same title, same job description, but it's different from being in Lebanon to do it and to do it in Ireland. For me, I never thought that the telecommunication sector could involve working in any data or like Excel sheets, dashboards, or like it was easy for me because I have experience working with the Excel files, but you have to adapt to the system of the employer itself and the system of the country itself.
Thank you. Sara, did you want to add anything from the UK?
I agree with Khaled actually at the point that he mentioned. Yeah, as he said, it's like when we were in Lebanon, we were thought that, get a job in UK and everything will be like just straightforward, same policies, same procedures as back home, but it's different in reality. It's more challengeable. You need to be more resilient. You need to be more adaptable to everything, and you need really to understand not only your rights but also your duties to the employment and what you need to do to settle in more quicker. For me, when I moved to UK before the departure, I was really because of that thought that you in your mind that you're leaving your own country, your best friend, your family, and moving. I was unable to focus to improve my English skills. So when I just arrived here, oh, okay, I have the basic, but I'm not confident to practicing it. And that was one of the biggest barrier when I just arrived. And luckily there was a lot of Arabic patients, so it was helpful as well. So I was able to even sometimes to translate and even to give them support in Arabic. I was just, sorry, I just want to add, like, it's good to address these misconceptions by get more like info about your job and just set your goal with a specific time and make sure you complete what you need to do. Like for nursing, you need to register with the Nursing and Midwifery Council. So you have to do an exams, and one of the exams is the English test. And the preparation for the English test is not easy. So you really need to focus on that, plus on your work as well as a full-time. And then you have to do the practical test to be a registered nurse. So you really need to focus at the beginning on, at the first month, to finish what you need to do regarding the job. And then it's also because when you will be a registered nurse, even your salary will be better than the healthcare assistant. So you'll be more stable, will be more financially stable to find maybe a good flat or a good accommodation. Also, I would say, also it's good to be more involved with education and skills development by getting training, and yeah, that's what I'd say.
Thank you, Sarah. Did you want to add to that point?
No, thank you for that. I want just to add a point. Europe is already attractive. I mean, thousands of people are arriving irregularly to this continent every day, but because they don't have an opportunity to come legally. That's the point. They're seeking protection in this continent. What if we can support them before taking irregular movement and coming here? I made an example before with some colleagues. More than 1,000 people are entering every day from the crisis in Sudan to Egypt. All of them will arrive here. What we are investing, we will invest millions of humanitarian euros to support them there and to keep them there, but they will arrive anyway to Germany, to France, to Italy. What if this kind of investments that we are already doing and we will be doing for those kind of crises can be linked to pathways and can be linked to job opportunities to fill this gap that we are facing? I think that can be an attractiveness for Europe as well.
Thank you. And I think that actually brings us quite well onto thinking about partnerships and the future. So Lara, I wonder if you could come in there just in terms, we know that partnerships and obviously working with varied different sort of stakeholders and actors are going to be essential to expanding labour mobility initiatives. What are some of the lessons that you would share from collaboration efforts to date?
Okay, so I think one of the key learnings for us in Lebanon has been that while there's an extraordinary amount of technical and vocational education and training in Lebanon, it's all primarily geared towards integration into the labor market in Lebanon. It's not tooled or calibrated for the international labor market, and there remain some real opportunities to do so. I think you have to also understand that for the situation for Syrians is that they have severe labor market restrictions. They can only work in construction, industrial cleaning, and agri-food. So there are many occupations that that Syrians are not allowed to legally work in, and that restriction also really shapes what people's hopes and dreams might be in terms of accessing vocational training. We're not in the business of promoting vocational training in an area where people won't have access to work. At the same time that we know that there are massive shortages in agri-food, for example, through some of our programming related to the Enterprise Development Fund, for example, we know we've been funding small and medium-sized enterprises in dairy. And we know that in the dairy industry, which is a very highly sophisticated industry in Lebanon, there are a number of Syrian employees hired by these small and medium-sized enterprises, and there remains an opportunity there to build kind of synergies amongst those programs. I think also, again, going back to this issue of calibrating our programming for the international labor market, there remain also some opportunities for linkages in terms of skills recognition in interjurisdictional skills recognition. Now, this is an issue also for migrant workers. How does one translate, for example, the skills and the learning and the experience that they have in one country, and how can that be recognized and then applied in another labor market. And so I think there are a lot of learnings from that experience in relation to migrant workers that can be extended to the case of Syrians in Lebanon and related to complementary pathways. So we're really seeking to I guess broaden our partnerships with those technical and vocational education training programs. We're in the process right now of building a significant program. We've started with funding from the government of Italy, and it's geared towards the creation or the facilitation of people, job seekers, through this entire pipeline. So looking at skills development, how does skills development then translate to job matching? How does job matching then segue to migration preparation? And I think what we've heard on this panel so far today is that there's needs for, I mean, while the systems are in place, there's room for improvement, and we're hoping to be able to work with partners in order to really fill those gaps. So understanding, for example, what more preparation refugees may need in terms of that pre-employment or pre-departure phase. How do they make better decisions in terms of which opportunities to avail themselves, and then how to prepare themselves for the next steps while also holding jobs and going through the pressures of family life and other elements.
Thank you. I think, yeah, Melissa, did you want to add to that?
Thank you. No, sorry. Thank you so much. I think this is really interesting, and it's very interesting too, because today I think we've explored mostly everything we set up in Europe and all the partnership we set up on this side of the pathways for things to work. But it's really important to think about there is a wealth of work that has to be done in sourcing country and of partnerships. And I just wanted to highlight two different actors that I think are very important to get involved with. And the first one, which may seem obvious, but is sometimes left out, is the government of the sourcing country. Because we have to remember that most of the labor mobility pathways to Europe are set up through bilateral agreements between European member states and third countries. And often that's how these agreements are made. But these agreements rarely today involve refugees, right? Because for third countries, they are thinking first and foremost, which makes complete sense, about the needs of their nationals. So it's very important that we bring these sourcing countries into the fold and explain to them why this is a win-win situation for Europe, for refugees, but also for them. And really, I think this is really a conversation that we can keep having. And I think they can really think, because for some of these countries, some countries, like Lara has mentioned, have really restricted refugee access to the labor market because, again, there is a really high rate of unemployment for Lebanese in Lebanon. So they're also trying to address this. But so they may be happy to facilitate access to employment elsewhere for refugees who cannot access the labor market. But also we can think about remittances, because we see that actually refugees who travel abroad for work, they continue to invest in that country of first asylum because they have family, because they have community. Sometimes, again, if they can reaccess their country, they also invest because it's much easier to set up a business, I will tell you, in a developing country than it is in Europe, unfortunately. So people will go abroad, they will earn money, and they will invest, they will build houses, they want to invest in the future as well. So I think there is really argument we can make to sourcing country to bring them into the fold. Then another actor that I think we really need to think about when we think about this partnership are refugee communities. So we've talked a lot about how there is really a gap of knowledge around labor mobility pathways among refugee communities. And it was really telling for me that, Khaled, that you said, I heard about this from a friend. Because this is how we hear about opportunities. We hear it from our friends. And sometimes our friends are well informed, and sometimes a bit less so. You know, so it's really important for us to think how we informing refugee community themselves so they can advocate to each other about this. And I just wanted to highlight a small pilot project that took place in 2023 in Jordan. So UNHCR partnered with WUSC, and they trained 15 young refugees to be guidance counselors for within the 4 main refugee community of Jordan. And these 15 guidance counselors conducted information session, one-on-one CV writing sessions. They guided applicants through interview processes, and they managed to reach up to 3,000 applicants. It was a very small pilot project, and they doubled the number of refugees who registered on the TBB platform, because they were really going where the applicants are. They know them, they come to them from a place, and they understand the experience throughout this process. And now this pilot is looking to be replicated in Iraq and Egypt, but I think there is really, again, a lot of investment we can make to make sure that refugee communities can really support these processes.
Thank you. I think the point about word of mouth is so important, and you know, we often ask candidates how they find out about the program, and the majority of the time it is word of mouth. I think when I started at TBB almost 3 years ago, we had about 30,000 people registered on the talent catalogue, and here we are with over 110,000, and that number continues to grow month to month. Your point about remittances as well, we survey candidates in the UK, and Sarah might jump in if I'm wrong, but last I remember, the number was sort of 86% of candidates sending remittances within 3 months of arrival. And we really have to navigate that with sessions around budgeting as well, and you know, landing in a new country and going through the process of finding accommodation. We've heard about those challenges. So when you're trying to save for a deposit and save for rent, but also sending money home, you know, there's all additional sort of barriers that we navigate. I'm actually going to jump. We've talked a bit. Lara sort of mentioned some sort of train to hire sort of schemes and some work with Italy, and I wondered if Daniele might want to come in there on the potential for train to hire models and some of the work that you're doing there. Nope.
No? Yeah, it's working. Okay. Okay. Now, I think that, I mean, many things has already been said about the training potential. Even this morning, I want to endorse what Anthony was saying about expanding it to other potential sector. It has been mentioned, the IT sector. We are doing a program in Uganda with IT specialists with different companies, with 9 companies that are hiring 25 refugees. Training is ongoing at the moment. And I think bringing companies together with a sectoral approach and building pipelines and building credibility around this, I think that can address the needs of employers, as it has been mentioned also before. Of course, I mean, every sector has its own specific skills needs. We can find people with the skills that are needed that might need just a little upskill to be included in the job market in Europe. Like, for example, we are doing a project in Jordan to hire goldsmith specialists, so jewelers that make jewels. They can have the skills to make it, because they've been working on that for years, but they don't have the right skill, industrial skill, let's say, that how we make it in Europe. So they just will need a little upskill to be included in the market. Of course, we need to build it with companies. Labor mobility exists because there is a labor need. So we need companies that back this kind of hire, train, and move program. Of course, there is a lack of resources around that. So it is a kind of dichotomy between going broad, wide, and going deep into skills. Because when we think about IT skills, as we were talking with Khaled as well, I mean, there are job descriptions that are 2 pages of descriptions. So a lot of different skills that are needed in the job market. When we take more manual things, so we can be more wide. So literally have this kind of different types of training program can bring more people in. And again, language. Baseline of languages, it will be the key of success for Europe. I mean, of course, we see a lot of potential in France and Spain because we can tap into refugee population that can speak French and Spanish, but it's not the same case of Germany, of Italy, of Slovakia, of Belgium as well. So we need to invest in training before departure on language.
Thank you. And I wonder, there I was reflecting as well on, we talk about the training and employers investing in the training pre-departure. And we've also seen some examples of recruitment happening in source countries. And we've welcomed an employer in Lebanon and an employer in Jordan and to facilitate in-person recruitment with candidates, actually welcome them into either the TBB office, IOM office, and then also into their sort of company offices in Jordan. And both times the employer came in to hire, 1 to 2 candidates and offered 3 or 4 candidates those opportunities. And, again, these are small numbers, but we're sort of talking about how we scale this and how we better facilitate the opportunities for employers to be a part of this source aspect of the journey that we're talking about, both in terms of training, recruitment, and before departure. Did you want to come in on that point?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that, this whole notion of skills mobility partnerships with both employers and with training providers is really key. We're working on this institutionally in the context of migrant workers, but additionally also in Lebanon currently, we have a very interesting well, first of all, I'd like to say that there's kind of two, when we're talking about train to hire, there can be literally train to hire. I'm going to train 5 workers and I'm going to then hire those 5 workers. There's also this conceptualization of training a pool of workers, of which maybe like if you trained 100 workers or job seekers, that you may hire 5 of them, but then the 95 would end up going into the local labor market and benefiting the employer community in the country in which they're being trained. So this whole this modality of skills mobility partnerships is really important. We're currently in the middle of a pilot project in green tech. It's for solar installation, which of course is really important for Lebanon. I don't know if people in the room understand, but the public utility only provides 2 hours of power every day. So the rest of the time it's run on generators or on solar, but the uptake of solar energy in a country that has 300 days of sunlight is really high. But this is also a beautiful training environment for solar installation in other countries. So we are working currently with a training entity out of Germany, Green Tech Training. They are basically in collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce in Tripoli, which is in the north of Lebanon. It's an area of high outbound migration. It's a vulnerable community. We've been working on establishing basically a training environment so that the solar installers who are being trained there, they may have experience installing in Lebanon, but they're being basically, we've created a training environment so they know about the specificities of training to German specifications and also to German roofs, to German requirements. So this is currently in our pilot phase. Right now we're targeting Lebanese, but we will be focusing in phase 2 to also broadening to the Syrian population and possibly to other communities who are also vulnerable to either outbound migration or irregular outbound migration or to other Syrian communities. But we see the success of this and the potential of this. For example, if somebody is trained to German specifications, it's likely that they're going to meet other specifications in Europe. So, and then potentially in North America or Australia.
Thank you so much for those reflections. I think we have about 20 minutes left. So I might open up for questions from the audience. We've got Claire over there.
Hi. Yeah, thanks, Holly. It was just a question on what Lara mentioned at the end, that the green tech example, which is super interesting. I just wanted to ask on that, could you say a little bit more about the actual length of the training and maybe the sort of, just to give us an idea of how complex doing that is? And the main reason I ask is just, I think you're right to point out the potential of that scheme is just, you know, phenomenal. I mean, obviously the Germans are super ahead and they've got quite a number of these types of partnerships, including in kind of, you know, green related areas. And I don't know, there's not many countries that are doing similar, but they would really use that talent, obviously. So yeah, just a little bit about the length of time, how complex it is. And mainly I'm sort of interested in this, linking back to your comment, Daniele, of this little bit of upskilling. You know, I think this is a really important message for the European Union in the context of its construction sector shortages, that we are not talking about, you know, starting from scratch. You're talking about taking an already experienced electrician or plumber and just giving that additional modern green, you know, requirement on top. And often for something like heat pumps, which were already mentioned, I know that, you know, that can be the question of a week. So I'm just, but I don't know solar so well. So I'm just really keen to hear a bit more detail. Thanks.
Thanks for that question. It's really important. And it's really important not only in the context of what we're talking about today, but just in broader terms of meeting labor market needs. I've spoken to employers in Canada, for example, who, you know, they don't want somebody who's gone through a 2-year, you know, community college program. They need people today. And they need people who have the basics today so that they can be upskilled on the job. And frankly, in the context of complementary pathways, it's even more important because the financial burden of long programs is really cannot be overstated. So it's one of the barriers to accessing these kinds of vocational trainings and to then accessing complementary pathways. This program that we're designing, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 weeks, but it's not a 6-month or 1 year or 2-year program. It's a short course. And it's a short course designed to be able to meet these specific needs. Now, I will also say that the program is geared towards the installation of the panels on roofs. It's not to connecting to the main grid. That's something that has to be done by a licensed technician in Germany. But the simple installation on the roofs is already an important first step. And I was thinking also just in conversations about, for example, the incredible need of roofers in Canada. There's a real shortage there. Well, Canadian roofs and Lebanese roofs aren't the same, but we could certainly create a learning environment for roofers in Lebanon that would then help them to take the skills and competencies that they have and then translate that to the country of destination. Do this with engagement with employers, in partnership with employers, and in partnership with guilds and trade unions to be able to ensure that that indeed these training that the training programs are fit for purpose and they meet the needs of employers. So importantly, this pilot project that we're doing with Green Tech also involves stakeholders in Germany. So I think it's Inno Energy is one of the partners that Green Tech Training works with. They're a public-private partnership in Germany. So we have industry-specific input into the training curriculum, and that's what's going to make this successful for the trainees and job seekers. But also just to advocate more short courses, and how can we take people who have those initial basic skills and then enable them to be facilitated to, again, the needs of the employers in countries of destination.
And I would encourage everyone, there is a workshop tomorrow on bridging the gap, which I think is going to look at a lot of these aspects between sort of talent and employment. So do attend that. We have some more questions. Yes, David, and then we'll come to the online questions.
Hi, bit related, David Manicum with Fragment and Talent Beyond Boundaries. I don't really expect you to answer my question, panelists, but to think about how we can answer it kind of on behalf of the work streams with the Global Task Force. because we're working on, train to hire work streams. We're working on financing work streams, and there's a workshop on that tomorrow too. What do we know about unit costs for different types of programs? How did you figure them out in advance, Lara, in order to develop funding models? What reservoirs of data are there with UNHCR, IOM, and others to give examples? So of course, the answer is it's going to vary. But I think as we're working on scaling mechanisms globally, we need to gather what we do know about unit cost for different types of training programs in different source country environments. So that'd be extraordinarily helpful. Stay in touch. Thanks.
Unit costs are certainly important in the cost of these programs. I think, again, we need to do a more comprehensive survey of what kinds of vocational training programs already exist to mobilize, to build off what already exists, that we don't have to work in silos. We can rather take a more ecosystem-based approach. And I'm going to bring this up because I realize it hasn't come up necessarily today, but also how do we gender mainstream this work? Because when we're talking about barriers to accessing technical and vocational education and training, the ILO just released a very interesting report on barriers to accessing TVET in Lebanon. I think it's not just the being able to access the TVET, but also being able to access employment that will enable and training, including language training. So how do we help facilitate, for example, some kind of livelihood stipend so that people aren't working double duty as well as attending language training at night when they're already fatigued and don't really have the time? Are there needs for example, childcare or transportation assistance? These are the kinds of problems that we're looking at, and again, to try and take a broader ecosystem approach to enabling people to be able to avail themselves of these opportunities.
Thank you. Please, Sarah.
So just regarding about the training of the English, I just have a thought, if we really focus on, like in Lebanon, there's a center called Sibleen Training Center, and that is funded by an UNRWA. It's basically for the candidate who are unable to cover the university expenses. So they go through this, they go to this training center, and then with a lot of professionals like business administration, accountant, lab technicians, even with the trade skills professionals. So basically, if we went there, or maybe if we got like partnership with the UNRWA, if we got trained or focus on what we need more like regarding like labor markets or regarding the English courses as well. And if we provide the English maybe teaching program from the beginning, where when they start doing their courses to achieve the diploma, or it will be really helpful if they just doing it while they learning the professionals. It might be just an idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll do the online questions and then we'll come back to the audience.
Great. So we have 2 online questions, and the first one we'll ask is from Steve Levent, who kind of asked this to the whole panel, but maybe specifically Daniele. How can we solve the language problem for people who have the necessary skills, for example, working in healthcare, but don't necessarily have the language abilities, such as learning or knowing Flemish? Should they choose to only relocate to English-speaking countries, or are there other means or ways that we can facilitate their relocation to countries like Belgium so that we can still attract top talent?
I don't think that there is one magic solution to that. I mean, you need to be in a country to learn a language. You need to study to learn a language. The main point that we are trying to stress is what we call hire, train, and moves. So it is the opposite. So engaging companies before to hire on potential with the skills, because people can invest in learning a language or upskilling if they have an opportunity somewhere, or we can invest we can find unit cost, we can invest in livelihood programs if we know that those people will have an opportunity. If not, it's like a baseline training for everyone that can hire the cost of everything. So hiring before on potential with the right skills that the people might already have, like taking the example of transportation and truck drivers. We have thousands of truck drivers already registered in the talent catalog. They are truck drivers that are already driving a truck somewhere, and they just don't have a driving license. If they can get a job, companies can pay, because they normally do it, can pay for their training, and they can invest in learning the language as well, and to move after the training. And as well as it has been mentioned by Jem, I think this morning, using the time of the procedure to learn the language, it might be something that can be feasible. Of course, that there is the element of certainty, because everyone needs a certainty to have the time to invest in something. I will learn Flemish if I have a job opportunity there, not just because, or just because I like Japanese, I can study Japanese, but it's not the case of the population that we are thinking about.
So just to add, because I think it's really important if we just look at what's happening with labor migration around us. For example, I think the predictability of opportunities is very important. As I think also if European states really invest in saying we are going to make labor migration to our country easier, people will invest in the language. And I think a very good example of this is Germany. Germany is making a dedicated effort to facilitate access to the labor market. And I will tell you, from my personal experience living in the Middle East, parents all across the Middle East are sending their kids to German-speaking schools, because they know that if they graduate with a German high school degree, if they speak German, they have a much better chance at international hiring. People all across Africa are learning Mandarin because they see, because China is making investment in Africa and China is offering opportunities. So I think people will learn languages, but you have to say it cannot be that there is one chance that you will go to Belgium, so I will learn Flemish. It needs to be so easy to come to Belgium that of course I will learn Flemish, you know? So I think it's really about this predictability of opportunities. Oh,
On that point, I mean, I think it all also begins with the outreach that we've been talking about to migrant communities and to refugee communities, that the opportunities that exist, when they clearly exist, need to be explained to people so that they can make educated decisions about their futures. They can decide what to study. They can decide what languages to study, and have this idea of wanting to emigrate to Germany, or wanting to go to Belgium. And sometimes that might be linked to their family networks and diaspora communities. So, but it begins with that education and outreach, so that people can really make educated decisions about where they really wish to go, and then you know, address the vocational or language training that they need in order to avail themselves of those opportunities. For our programming, we're fairly agnostic. We're right now in the process of getting together a group of language schools that are teaching English, but we're also not. We can also do that for Italian or German or Flemish. It's just a matter of where the demand exists. And to that point, I just wanted to say that I think that sometimes in this discussion, we talk a lot about sectors and sectors in need, but we need to drill down to the occupations, because it's actually the occupational profiles that we need to focus on in terms of adapting our training and really targeting our funding to places where they can have the most impact. So for example, in construction, everyone knows that there are needs for workers in construction almost everywhere. But what occupations? Are we talking about electricians? Are we talking about plumbers, carpenters, scaffold directors? I mean, there are probably 50 plus occupations. So, and which ones are, which are the occupations where there are already a talent pool in Lebanon? I mean, for our purposes. So, so maybe, yeah. So that just, and I think that goes back to this point of wanting to do better in terms of forecasting future need and looking at those occupational profiles, and then being able to adapt training curricula to meet those specific needs of employers. And I think, again, there's probably commonality amongst countries of destination, but it's important to do that.
Thank you. I think we have time for another question. Maria, was there another one online?
Yes, there's one more, mostly for Melissa. It's from Clara Rhodes, and she asks, we keep discussing the importance of durable solutions. However, how can durability be ensured in practice when admission through a single permit visa is contingent upon temporary permits? What are the legal and procedural implications if displaced talent pursue asylum in the country of destination? And is it possible for them to hold dual status under both the work permit and refugee framework?
Thank you. I think that's a very important question. So obviously for most refugees, it's very important that these opportunities lead to durable solution, because again, there is not a way back. And making the decision to leave the safety of a country where maybe there are no opportunities, but there is safety, is a very big choice. So I think we really need to think, and it's really, we talked a lot today about the importance of informed consent. So it's really important that we have really informed decision with refugees so they can really weigh the pro and the cons of those decisions, because they have real consequences in the future. Obviously, UNHCR standing advocacy, and I'm sure that of everybody in this room, is that everybody always has the right to seek asylum anywhere they find themselves to, no matter the type of permit or however they entered that country. And I think that is one of the fail-safe that refugees can always avail themselves of. But it's also important that that be part of the conversation with our destination countries. Obviously, refugee labor mobility is kind of this halfway path between the refugee regime and the normal migration regime. But of course, even if people are entering as migrants, we keep in the back of our mind their specific needs. And again, they always their right to seek asylum. And unfortunately, there is not really, once you seek asylum, then you change regime. You are no longer a labor migrant, but it doesn't matter because you still have the right to work. So that shouldn't impact your employment situation. Thank you.
Thank you. I wonder if anyone from the panel has one final reflection on today's session, if there's anything you think that you've missed, or sort of a lasting comment that you would like our audience to have just before we wrap up.
I mean, I think just my last comment will be, I think this panel was very important today, because it's very important as we sell this concept of refugee labor mobility that we build context for actors in Europe about the reality of the work on the other side. I think often people do not really know what's happening behind the scene. And then when things take a long time or things become more complicated, they'll be taken unaware. So it's very important that we keep having this conversation and we build these bridges between the partners on the ground in sourcing country and those in destination countries. Oh, and sorry, just one last thing. I really want to thank TBB for the presence of Sara and Khaled on this panel today and throughout this event. I think it's really important that we keep in mind that refugees are at the center of this project. They should be there from the design till the monitoring and evaluation. So we really appreciate their presence today, and thank you for your courage. I know it's not easy.
Yeah, I just want to had the last sentence about connecting dots. I was talking with some of you during the lunch and the break, and someone told me, I just don't know many in this room, which is good. I mean, we normally are in the same room with the same people talking about refugees. Here we have an online, a lot of people that are working in silos, probably still, but we can connect the dots. We can connect the dots with researchers. There are researchers with companies. There are companies with NGOs. There are NGOs with multinational, multilateral organization here with refugees. So different actors. We need a puzzle to compose in the future to make it happen and scale. And probably the people in this room is not enough. Of course, it will not be enough, but connecting dots of what already exists, that is a lot, and connecting the dots with the pathways to scale it up, it can be one of the challenges that we should address in the next future.
To say just thank you for the TPB that's helped us with to find the opportunity and work in UK. For me as an alumni, I don't really mind like to do maybe like a physical workshop, even like if it's maybe in Lebanon or even here, just to tell really like where the challenges, what were like our own story before and even after the departure. And yeah, that's the main things. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
So I think my final point, which is probably a two-part point, is just, I guess, a caution against about this narrative of going to scale, that we need to scale vertically, not just scale horizontally. So otherwise we run the risk of our programs really enabling cherry picking, where we're already just picking the best of the best and leaving the people who don't have access to programs or don't have the access to that assistance, we're leaving them basically in the dust. So we need to take a more ecosystem-based approach. And that's why we're in our program design for our current programming, we're really focusing on that, working with training providers and trying to, I guess, square the circle somewhat. And additionally, that also requires a little bit of donor alignment. So we've had representatives here from the EU and from other member states. I think it's important that sometimes they need to also go into their own house and find out what's being done in terms of humanitarian support, because that humanitarian funding that's happening in countries of origin can then help facilitate access to complementary pathways. And that by I guess, bringing those energies together, we're going to end up being more impactful and we'll have greater scale.
Yep. So I'll keep it simple and add a point for Daniel's point about connecting dots. So he's probably talking about employers, governments, partnership, IOM, TPP. I think we could connect dots with the refugees ourselves, because like I received a message from Tigwan on Slack 2 days ago, and she told us that she was happy because one of the colleagues, he will be coming to Ireland. He made it and did the appointment to issue the PPS social number before he even come to Ireland, based on our experience. So it was very helpful. And I think if we started to be proposing idea and helping each other, and to have our network between each other, like Ireland, UK, and even like a network for Ireland itself, network for UK itself, Belgium, and then a whole network around Europe, it would be so helpful for the refugees. And maybe like I can volunteer to be a mentor for like Mu'min, he's coming to Ireland. I could be his mentor like for the first 2 weeks, first month. He could be later my friend, maybe not, I don't know. But it's a good idea to help him, like, because first month it would be like very difficult for the refugees, and it's a very good idea to connect dots between refugees. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know Tegwin has noted that, and you will no doubt be his buddy. Now, I know I'm on about -3 minutes, despite the best efforts at my timekeeping. So without further ado, if we could just thank our wonderful panel today for their expertise.